Hey everybody, Ozarkum here. So I want to talk really quick today. You see the headline here, but really how they're doing the typical conservative thing and they are not, talking about the core of the issue. Because when they talk about woke or any of the garbage being pushed destructively on our culture, they never talk about the origins of it. They never talk about how it's all deliberate. They will talk about the specific things without saying that it's actually bad. They'll not say, hey, you know what, it's inappropriate to talk about rainbow stuff to kids because of the nature of the topic itself. It's inappropriate to, talk about what they're trying to push on children, on culture and education, degrading the culture, the disgusting things that we see from entertainment to Hollywood, and the anti-Western things that we constantly see from entertainment to media. The typical conservative response is just call it woke. The problem is, here's the major fallacy and what has really led to the extreme level of tension between left and right. Of course, the conservatives are always 10 years behind the left, and the left has felt so open to do whatever they want, to hate on the founding people, specifically the traditional Western family, the idea of faith, family, and freedom. And really, folk was a big part of that too, but we dropped that, didn't we? See, that's really the core of the issue. We talk about left versus right. We talk about values, but we have played whack-a-mole with the values without actually talking about the origins of who we are as a people. That we all have this shared common experience as old stock Americans, coming from Europe, being descended from these ancient peoples. That our history is ancient, not just something in the last couple of years, because the whole idea of the melting pot, and every stage of it since, we have slowly but surely given up our identity as the Western people, as the founding Western people of these Western nations. The majority of British major cities aren't even ethnically British or European anymore. And again, every time we talk about it, we have to talk about, oh, it's bad for them too. We have to talk about the reason it's bad for the people. We have got to talk about housing. We've got to talk about the economy. Meanwhile, our people are constantly getting more and more ethnically frustrated because we are not allowed to speak up for ourselves on the basis of our ethnic and cultural group, of our shared history. Meanwhile, everybody else does. Sure, they'll roll out Candace Owens and Tulsi Gabbard, and I'm for some of y'all that might get, that like these folks in the comments and all that. I'm not talking specifically about those folks. I'm talking about how the conservatives and the establishment will roll them out. And meanwhile, while Candace Owens might call something anti-white, anti-Western, degenerate, meanwhile, she will take, that money and she will turn around and she will put it toward Blexit, a specific group of people, because she wants her people, black Americans, to go a different direction culturally, to improve themselves, right? And I can't really fault her for that, can you? But she's the one they're rolling out. And Tulsi Gabbard is the one that they're rolling out in order to speak up for our people, instead of us being able to speak up for ourselves. Republicans will be more than happy to say something as though the bigotry of low expectations. Democrats are the real racists, what they're really doing. And when we say, I don't see color, common heritage and shared history and background is not a color. Maybe the color was what we used to describe it. But again, it's a false presentation of our entire history. It's a false presentation of who we are as a people, of what we have in common as the European people. So again, reunited in a tribe, just like we have done throughout our entire ancient history here in America, and we are, ethnically speaking, the Americans, as defined by the 1828 Webster's Dictionary. An American, ethnically speaking, is someone born of European descent in America. Well, what about black people? They've been here for 400 years. Well, yeah, they're black Americans, African Americans, again, whatever term they coined for themselves. And really, nobody argues that collectively they can have their own interests. We might disagree with BLM politically, but it's not the fact that they organize ethnically. It's the fact that, well, there is some frustration there because, again, you have the black national anthem being proposed from a position of identitarianism and specifically identity politics, because that's really the crux of this. They're allowed to speak up for themselves ethnically, but then Republicans and conservatives have no problem with Blexit because it's more ideologically agreed to us and aligned to us. And we are not allowed to express ourselves ethnically. We're not allowed to say that we are ethnically tied. We are the people who are ethnically tied, the Western people tied to this Western nation. And that American flag and that the national anthem and everything is a symbol of us, not just as a symbol, but it's a symbol of us by blood, by ethnicity. Whether your ancestors some of your ancestors came a little bit later from the 1900s, all the way back to the 17, and most of us, all the way back to the 1600s, some of them. That we are the old stock Americans, and we are the founding people, just like the English are of England, just like the Scots are of Scotland. And at the end of the day, we have a say, again, as the founding people of the founding nation. Our history is selectively edited and demonized. And again, the Republicans' answer is to call it CRT and critical theory and woke in order to, they just won't blatantly say hardly that it's anti-white. It's anti-Western. When they're against Western civilization, maybe it affects some non-Western people in Western civilization, but the absolute core and purpose behind it is to negatively affect the Western people of that civilization. The West was successful through capitalism, and it could not be dismantled by the Marxists through, by telling us that we need to overthrow our oppressors, quote unquote, because, again, we're too successful. Because we are successful and comfortable, though, that's where cultural Marxism came from. And when we say, I don't see color, we are buying the propaganda. We're just 50 years behind instead of 10 years behind in this issue. By saying, I don't see color, to ignore our common heritage, ethnicity, ancestry. Because, again, that is a major factor. Nobody will ignore the obvious fact, that different cultures and different ethnicities form their own hybridized cultures when they come here and kind of group together as a people and might even collectively have interests. When Asian people were attacked on the streets, but again, the media blamed it on white supremacy. And why? Because anything, whether it is a religion, political movement, anything that is predominantly made up of white people, any profession that is predominantly white is deemed not diverse enough, is deemed white supremacy. Anything that is predominantly white is deemed white supremacy. That's what we need to realize. Everything that's called white supremacy is anything that is white. Our history. In other words, ethnically European. Just like the American people and the American nation is and was. Because that's what we are, the founding people. We've been afraid, and this is kind of where it started, we've been afraid that maybe the neighbor, the family, or whatever that is not ethnically Western, you're going to offend them because you might, assert your ethnic identity and speak up for yourselves and your interests as a people. Well, they'd probably laugh at that. Because they absolutely won't be afraid to have their own ethnic identity and expression and everything, and interests as a people if they're being attacked on that basis. We might disagree ideologically about the approach. The problem that we typically have is the anti-white and the anti-traditional family approach, and the cultural Marxist approach of BLM, because again, it is expressly anti-Western, and is against us. Notice an ethnic group like the whole Stop Asian Hate thing, they're not allowed to speak up for themselves unless it's anti-white, unless it's from an anti-white perspective. It's not even white people attacking them on the streets. That is the problem. If we want to break the left-right paradigm, if we want to break, the libertarian approach did not work. Do not tread on me again did not work. It doesn't present a solution. Conservatives will not use the political power that they have. They're only 10 years behind. So we have to be able to speak up for ourselves ethnically. Because at this point, we, objectively speaking, are not a nation. One of the hard truths that conservatives are going to have to accept. We are not, by any objective or historic metric, by the way, a nation. And by the way, the conservative Christians, while we were excellent on pointing out the historic issues ahead of time, we were right about the slippery slope, and really it was the fact it was a slope was a problem way back then, like even in the 90s when they were warning about it. But even then, they didn't speak up for themselves as a people, speak up for the family, speak up for their faith, but again, for their folk, for their nation. It didn't say blesses the economic zone with some vaguely defined borders that are constantly violated, whose God is the Lord. No, it said blesses the nation whose God is the Lord. Objectively speaking, a somewhat related group of people with similar language and culture and land. There might be others who have similar language, somewhat similar culture, and then live in this land. But again, they might not be your people. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging the differences and of loving and taking care of the interests of your own people. You're going to first have to acknowledge that the interests of the other people that are given mega donations and institutional power, it's all only from an anti-white perspective, and it has to be against us. Why? Because we are the dominant culture and people. We're the founding people, slowly but surely. And you're wondering why these, the young Southern men who always used to make up the bulk of military enlistments aren't signing up anymore. Well, for one thing, they have the internet, they can research, and they realize that they're trying to start another brother war in Europe after the first, two slaughtered off a bunch of young white men and multiple generations, going all the way back to the Civil War. And they're not okay with another brother war, especially when, they see the historic statues of their ancestors and their history torn down. They see their ethnic and cultural symbols in the South torn down and destroyed. They see the working and middle class of their people demonized as the evil demons of history, when they really predominantly been keeping themselves and making a living in the mountains of Appalachia. So, no wonder we see this so-called woke garbage come up, but they call it woke because the conservatives are not the solution. And the solution is we have to saying I don't see color is not defeating the so-called woke anti-white agenda. It's playing into just a different chapter of intersectionality, which is at its base by design is woke. You're just playing 50 years behind. You're woke 50 years ago. Well, you got to get rid of the whole kit and caboodle. The answer is to speak up for yourselves as a people. It's like, I mean, conservatives will argue that Brexit's a good idea for, for Candace Owens to preserve for her people. Might only get, 5-10% of the vote, whatever. But you know what? Now she's doing it. And she's doing it with the money of predominantly white boomers who are happy that she's speaking up on our behalf. But again, she's using that money for her people. Okay, go for it. We need to speak up for ourselves as a people and for our own collective ethnic interests. We are so individualist, and individualism has become so predominant in this nation that we've lost any collective ethnic identity as a Western people. We have to have that, and that's why we are being attacked. And to be honest, other ethnic groups, they will absolutely laugh at you. People come across the border in giant caravans, like, all you got to do is, tell these knucklehead gringos that, cry and tell them that they're racist if they don't let you come in their country and get 50% of them on welfare, have kids on your expense as they outnumber you and everything. And they're a bunch of idiots for doing it. And they will laugh at you for allowing them to do it. Don't. Stop being an idiot. Speak up for your people. We don't have time to worry about being offensive. Either be called evil and racist and white supremacist as you don't speak up for your people and your people are destroyed and your children have no future, or be called evil and hateful and white supremacist as you speak up for your people and reject that notion so it doesn't have any power. It only has power if you allow it to, if we collectively allow it to and we cower to it. So stop doing so. Those are coming. Y'all have a good one.